Societies claim to pursue the same goals: eradication of poverty, full employment, and socioeconomic justice. Yet the systems built to deliver these outcomes consistently fail. As the Soviet Union collapsed and neoliberal capitalism took hold globally, economist Umer Chapra published a landmark treatise, Islam and the Economic Challenge. Chapra argued that conventional economic frameworks are structurally incapable of delivering equitable outcomes. The reason is a structural incompatibility. These systems rely on a value-neutral worldview that strips human behavior of moral imperatives. During the Enlightenment, economic theory systematically unseated scholastic moral constraints in favor of secularism and utilitarianism. This created a permanent conflict. We demand humanitarian goals from an economic system, but we rely on a theoretical foundation rooted in social Darwinism. You cannot engineer moral macroeconomic outcomes using an amoral microeconomic operating system. Capitalism relies on the concept of homo economicus, the rational, self-interested individual. Adam Smith's early assumption was that an invisible hand would automatically convert individual greed into optimal public welfare. Socialism attempted to solve this by eliminating private property and the profit motive entirely. While this allowed states to mobilize massive resources for early heavy industrialization, it dismantled the economic incentives required for efficiency and innovation. By trying to run a vast economy without market-driven incentives or internally motivated moral constraints, the system inevitably defaulted to external coercion. The result was a totalitarian state apparatus that suppressed freedom and concentrated absolute power in the hands of a bureaucratic elite. The modern welfare state attempted to split the difference, injecting equity into capitalism through progressive taxation and fiscal transfers. But this approach tries to enforce equity on an individualistic, materialistic system through state coercion alone, without requiring internal moral restraint from consumers or corporations. This reliance on external transfers led to unsustainable public deficits, caused runaway inflation, and a stifling tax burden. Because those with capital easily avoided taxation, the fiscal weight fell primarily on wage earners. In the post-colonial world, developing nations adopted hybrid mixes of these models. They justified massive inequality using the Kuznets curve, the assumption that inequality must initially increase to maximize gross national product growth, ignoring how the policies themselves entrenched poverty. The simultaneous existence of immense wealth, unmet basic needs, and ecological degradation is not an anomaly. It is the mathematical output of secular operating systems suffering from profound algorithmic failures in resource allocation. This animation illustrates the core mechanism of capitalism, the price filter. It allocates scarce resources purely on effective demand backed by purchasing power, rather than human need. Notice how the purchasing power pulls resources exclusively toward the luxury goods bucket, leaving the basic needs bucket empty. The system evaluates a $10 vote for a status symbol by a wealthy family as mathematically equal to a $10 vote for milk by an impoverished family. It assumes equal spending indicates equal urgency, masking a severe misallocation of resources beneath the guise of Pareto efficiency. To rectify this without resorting to the totalitarian coercion of central planning, Chapra detailed a different structural architecture, the dual-layered filter mechanism. This is a schematic of a two-stage allocative process. The first stage is a translucent barrier, representing the moral filter. Guided by the objectives of Islamic law, or maqasid al-Sharia, this filter operates voluntarily within the consciousness of the economic agent before they even enter the marketplace. The internal logic of the consumer, Homo Islamicus, is driven by belief in moral accountability, or akhira. Watch how this internal filter actively screens out claims for wasteful extravagance and socially harmful production, preventing them from advancing further down the pipeline. Once these harmful claims are removed, the approved resource blocks flow smoothly into the second stage, the traditional price filter. The market mechanism now operates normally, but on a pre-screened base of demand, effectively distributing capital into both basic needs and sustainable growth. By synchronizing the price mechanism with an internal moral filter, the economy reaches a dynamic equilibrium. Efficiency and humanitarian equity are satisfied simultaneously. But allocative filters on the consumer side are insufficient if the underlying mechanism of capital creation inherently concentrates wealth. This brings us to the financial architecture and the prohibition of riba, or interest. Chopra positions this rule as an essential economic tool designed to correct asymmetrical risk distribution. Look at this scale representing a conventional loan. The bank sits on one side with a guaranteed fixed return, regardless of the venture's outcome. On the side, the entrepreneur is crushed beneath the entire weight of the operational risk. This asymmetry detaches the financial sector from the real economy. Capital bypasses high-utility productive ventures that lack massive collateral, and instead pours into low-risk, high-collateral luxury projects and speculative asset bubbles. Chopra's alternative is an equity-based financial architecture, anchored in profit and loss sharing models, such as trust financing and partnerships. In this model, banks transform from passive moneylenders into active investment partners. Here, the scale equalizes. Both the bank and the entrepreneurs share the same platform, jointly supporting the project risk, forcing institutions to evaluate credit based on intrinsic project viability rather than existing collateral. Beyond lending, private commercial banks currently enjoy the privilege of creating deposit money out of thin air through fractional reserve banking. This credit expansion acts as a hidden tax via inflation and heavily concentrates wealth by funneling new funds to affluent clients. This diagram illustrates Chopra's mandate to reclaim seigniorage, the profit derived from money creation. The power of credit creation is severed from private banks and rerouted into the central bank, which manages it as a public asset to finance social safety nets and microloans. Eradicating interest and publicizing seigniorage tethers the money supply directly to the expansion of goods and services, curbing speculative bubbles. Behavioral filters and equity financing establish a baseline, but they must be reinforced by aggressive macro policies to continually deconcentrate wealth and democratize economic opportunity. This begins with comprehensive land reform. Breaking up highly skewed feudal land ownership is a prerequisite for agricultural productivity and rural uplift, directly correcting the systemic neglect found in conventional development models. The zakat system acts as a macroeconomic transfer mechanism, where wealth continually flows from investable surplus directly into baseline consumption. Similarly, Islamic inheritance laws act as a forced fragmentation mechanism, automatically shattering massive blocks of generational wealth and dispersing them to prevent dynastic hoarding. These mechanisms act as continuous, systemic safeguards, ensuring that wealth circulates throughout the entire economy, rather than pooling indefinitely at the apex of society. The Islamic economic system stands as a distinct, organically integrated subsystem. It is built entirely on the foundational pillars of divine unity, human vicegerency, and socio-economic justice. Chopra issues a harsh critique of contemporary religious scholars, noting that their historical overemphasis on micro-legalistic rituals ignored the macro socio-economic objectives of the Sharia, leaving a vacuum in modern institutional design. But his ultimate challenge is directed at mainstream economics. Material development with justice is impossible without the active moral restructuring of the human input. True macroeconomic stability and human progress can never be achieved by mathematically optimizing a broken algorithm. It must be anchored in the immutable principles of structural justice and moral accountability.